Welcome to That's High Praise, a Nicolas Cage podcast. And I am your host, Captain Nostalgia, and on this episode, I'm going to be joined by Mr. Micah Kimber, one of our staff podcasters here at Victims and Villains. And if you guys are new to this podcast, all the movies that we cover on this are specifically chosen by the patrons over at our sister show Victims and Villains, which is also a nonprofit dedicated to educating and engaging individuals on mental health awareness through pop culture. So you guys can go to patreon.com/victims and villains. And on this episode, we are talking about 1999's Bringing Out the Dead. Well, let's go ahead and get into the spoiler territory, and let's start off with this dynamic between Frank and Mary that is like left up in the air. And you know, Frank is a guy that is so badly desiring and seeking peace more than anything. When we follow him in the ambulance, he is just wanting peace, whether that comes in the form of sleep, coffee, alcohol, narcotics, like whatever. He just wants rest, and he just wants silence from these ghosts. And it almost kind of like seems like they were setting up Mary to kind of be that, like silence. And like that's actually the last shot of the movie, but it's never. I don't feel like it's executed very well from that standpoint.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. And you're right. It's like he's chasing. Yeah, it's like whether it's like you said, whether it's narcotics or coffee or alcohol or just a vitamin B cocktail, like, you know, he's always chasing some sort of peace, some sort of rest, some sort of resolution, you know, and even in the form of walking away from his job or wanting to be fired, even that kind of he views as some sort of solace, but it's interesting because it's never like. It's never explained in his relationship, like you wanted to talk about that, like his relationship with this woman. It's never explained that like that's what he's seeking there. Like it is, like you kind of get it, but for the most part, she's just this woman worried about her dad, and he's just fixated on her because she's there. I guess I don't know. He never really like goes to see her. She's just always at the hospital where he keeps bringing people and they keep interacting.
There is a scene where he goes to see her.
Is there?
Yeah, it's right when it's like probably like either in the first or like end of the first act, beginning of the second act, but he like goes to check up on the father, and he's like talking with the doctor, and the doctor is like, he's like, this woman's been asking me for updates, and then finally when I have something good to tell her, I can't find her.
That's right, yep.
So then he goes, takes the ambulance, and they end up going. It's right at the beginning of the Marcus and Frank
right
shift.
At the end of like the little the John Goodman act. Yeah, it's really cool actually. The movie, when I was watching the movie, I was like, all right, this feels like there's 2 acts instead of 3. But if you really think about it, there are 3, and they're kind of distincted. They made that distinction with his partner changes, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, it didn't even really kind of dawn on me until like we're sitting here talking about that. But it's interesting when you look at both of their characters and the crossroads that they meet. So Frank is obviously burdened by failures of the job.
Right.
And Mary is burdened by, you know, whether or not her father is going to live truthfully.
There's more to it than that, though, because she does explain that, like, for 3 years she hadn't talked to him, and they were estranged, and she hated him. But then it was like her brother called her and being like, "Hey, you're you know, our dad is at a coronary or whatever. He's dying." You know, and it's really interesting because then she's like overcome with guilt and all this stuff, and just like like I want my dad to live or whatever, and it makes sense. Normally, I think that's a natural progression of emotion. You go from being related to somebody, being, upset or pissed off, estranged, embittered toward them, and then something happens to them and you begin to feel bad that you weren't there because of like your attitude. And that's natural. I think it's completely fair. But yeah, that's really why she fixates, and it's very interesting because I wonder if there's not intended to be a correlation between her guilt with her father and Nicolas Cage's guilt with like this Rose girl, and he's somehow trying to make it up to this ghost with this girl Mary.
Well, so that's kind of where I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is like, so when you're going through these like traumatic experiences and you meet someone that has that similar trauma,
yeah.
or, grief or whatever, those like encompassing emotions that, we find solace in, find peace in the companionship of someone that knows the journey that we're on, and the trajectory. And Mary and Frank, they find it in one another. You constantly see. We talked just a few minutes ago about the constant partner changes with John Goodman, Ving-rhames, and Tom Sizemore, and he's constantly trying to fulfill and see. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to me, particularly about this movie, is that he finds peace in Mary. Like he feels, but just completeness around her.
Never really does.
We've seen other IPs take on the idea of kind of showing PTSD of like firefighters or EMTs or doctors of what it's like to actually lose someone and like how you process that as a human. But I feel like here, Nicolas Cage you're never why this particular girl, I feel like, was one that I had the biggest lingering problems with. From a narrative standpoint. And also, too, I didn't really understand why the through line for him happened to be this father that we randomly meet in the beginning. Like, of all the patients that we see, why this one?
And like, it's very strange. It's very like, they didn't set it up as like, oh yeah, this is, they tell you that he's been working there for 5 years, but they don't say that like, oh yeah, this is 5 years ago, he lost this girl, she was 18, they tell you she was 18, and it's the first girl that he lost. They don't tell you that. If that had been the case, and he'd been haunted by his first, like, medical on-the-job failure, that would have made so much more sense. But there's nothing to it. Her name's Rose. It's never one of those things where like, oh yeah, he loved another woman named Rose. Or his mom or his sister was named Rose or anything like that. There was no established emotional connection whatsoever. He just failed, and it doesn't say like she was his only failure or anything. It was just like, oh yeah, she died. I couldn't save her, and now I see her everywhere I go, and I kind of talk to myself.
So he has this monologue in here that I screenshot it from IMDb.
Nice.
Rose's ghosts are...
IMDb?
Yeah. Rose's ghost was getting closer. It had been 6 months since I lost her. A homeless girl. Asthmatic. 18 years old. I used to block the bad calls out. I used to forget, but she wouldn't let go. And now she'd come to bear witness for all of them. All that had been lost. These spirits were part of the job, and it was impossible to pass a building that didn't hold a ghost or something. The eyes of a corpse. The screams of a loved one. All bodies leave their mark. You cannot be near the newly dead without feeling it. I can handle that. What haunted me now was more savage. Spirits born, half-finished, homicides, suicides, overdoses. Accusing me of being there, witnessing a humiliation, which they never could forgive.
Yeah. And I mean, sure, all that kind of makes sense logically. Like, you get haunted by your failures. And especially in that line of work, you're going to have things to remind you of them. But the only quote-unquote ghost he ever sees is this one girl, and there's just no reason for it.
Yeah. And also, too, another fun fact about this movie was, so Nicolas Cage, who plays Frank Pierce in this movie, and Mary Burke. Mary is the daughter of the father we meet at the beginning.
Yeah, it's like a first patient they bring in at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, and so he kind of is like this through line where like he's like getting better a little bit, but like he's speaking or like sending telepathic messages to Frank that like he wants to. So like the supernatural is like it's like it could be PTSD, it could be trauma, you know, but it's very much grounded. Nicolas Cage and Patricia Arquette were actually married at the time of this movie.
Wow.
Yeah, they married in 1995 and divorced in 2001.
Wow, I did not know that. Yeah, but it's interesting though because you never even he like kisses her cheek at one point, and that is the only time you ever even remotely get any sort of like romantic connection, or at least like mutual, I guess, romantic connection between the two of them. There's not like any reason that it's like, oh yeah, this father and his like, you know, hot daughter or whatever. It's not like set up that way.
Well, let's get into spoilers, and let's start with the relationship between Frank and Mary. Well, it's like we've been trained by the general population and like by movies in general to accept that if a male and a female are on screen together, that they have to have a romantic relationship. Yeah. And what's interesting, particularly about Bringing Out the Dead, is that it says, without saying, that you're basically having these two characters that are finding solace and peace with one another. And it doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't have to be anything over the top. You can just have something companionship, honestly.
That's true.
I think that that's one of the more humanistic elements about this movie because, you know, we're both being married. Like, you know, when you have hard days, like, I don't necessarily need sex on those days, and I just need solace in my wife.
That's very true. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a given. Yeah, I guess when it comes to like male female like relationships in movies, that's very true. That's a good point. Do we want to talk about the ending?
Well, I guess since we're still on Frank and Mary, let's jump into this ending, because this ending is just kind of very open and ambiguous a little bit. But but it's also very strange. So the ending of this movie is basically Frank, without, you know, getting into it, basically kills Mary's father.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be a mercy kill. It's not like how he does it's very, very interesting. And I suppose, like, not knowing enough about, like, the context, him being in ICU and like how they have him stabilized and stuff, like, you could kind of argue that maybe he didn't mean to, but it very much comes across like, oh yeah, this is what happened, and he's just kind of playing the fifth about it.
So he kind of almost uses that situation to manipulate Mary as kind of like a domino effect, that like if I kill her father, he'll be at peace, but then I'll also be at peace because I'm with her. And the very last shot,
right, like she has to let go.
Yeah, the very last shot is basically both of them in each other's arms, like comforting one another.
Yeah, and it's really like, it's not that it makes no sense, but you don't see it coming, and it is not satisfying. And, you know, then he starts seeing the quote-unquote ghost of this Rose girl again. And then this weird thing happens where Rose is talking, but using Patricia Arquette's voice. I don't know. It's really strange.
Yeah, especially given the context around those like sequence of events too.
Yeah,
it's the third act, so he's with Tom Sizemore, and Tom Sizemore is very much like, yeah, we're gonna go do stuff, and he's like very energetic about like wanting to like save lives of the people that he comes into contact to.
Yeah,
and there's like this like whole subplot in the third act where he's gonna go beat up Noel, who's
So let's explain Noel real quick, because Noel does occur in every act.
yes.
So Noel is this guy who the Mary character, Patricia Arquette's character, has known for a few years. He apparently like just kind of took a turn for the worst, but he used to be best friends with her brother, and he is tied down to a gurney when they go to like the ER the first time, and he's begging for a cup of water, and apparently the doctors seem to think that would kill him for some reason.
Well, so they explain Noel's circumstances way better than they did Rosa's circumstances.
Sure.
So, to your point about why he is the way that he is the doctors, when we first meet him, he has a rare blood disease.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And second, the Noel character had a...
he was shot in the head.
He was shot in the head by a drug dealer and put in a coma for 3 months. And then when they finally came out of the coma...
He came out
his
crazy.
Brain basically broke.
Yeah. And so he's like... in the first act, he's just a desperate guy who needs water. They can't give it to him. He finally gets out. They give him water. He seems fine. He runs off. The second act, he's like trying to commit suicide. They go rescue him. And then there's this funny sequence where Nick Cage is like, oh, yeah, let me take you to the ER. There's a room. There's a room for termination there. Do you want pills, injection, or gas? And he's like, pills. Yeah, pills. And it's this weird thing, but I wanted to really bring up Noel before we got to like the third act of Noel, because like he is a very evident steady person, or has been a steady person off and on in Mary's life. And so Frank attaches his attention to Noel. For better or for worse, he's always just like, they go out on patrol, he sees Noel, he locks onto him, they engage somehow. And it's very much goes back to the idea that you're saying, Josh, about just like, he's trying to find peace in this Mary girl, and he's trying to basically just like get on her good side in a way.
Well, Noel also kind of serves as an escape for him. Like, he doesn't have to, like you had said, like, he attaches himself to the Noel character, and in attaching himself, he finds a release away from these ghosts, because, boom, now he has attention on the current circumstances that allow the PTSD or the ghosts to kind of push pause for a few minutes so that he can be present with Noel. Yeah,
and Noel's never... he's never dying, but he's always in a position where he needs help. So I think you're right. Like he finds, he kind of pacifies like the way he feels by being able to help someone who's not at risk.
And Noel too, I think, is an interesting character to talk about, because he's very much almost our societal reflection of how we treat the mentally ill.
Ooh, good point.
Because there's a scene where Tom Sizemore character is riding around in the ambulance, and it's the very much when they first encountered, he's kind of explaining how he encountered for the first time Noel, and like how the two of them just didn't really click.
Yeah. And
he basically is like, let's go beat him up, basically. And he mentions that, the prisons don't want him, the hospital, he's like revolving door to the hospital, like he's just in and out, like no one really knows what to do with him. And there's even a scene too, the one that you talked about, where he's lying in the street waiting for
hit by a car
to get hit by a car, and everyone was just like, honking their horns, like they're so focused on where they need to go that they can't handle the fact that there's someone here that is in this intersection with the hopes to die. And I think that it's a very clear depiction of this is how our society handles the mentally ill, but also the suicidal as well, because if I had $1 for every time someone would be like, oh, they're just seeking attention, they're not really suicidal. I think we both would be able to rival Bruce Wayne in bank account money. And, it's just a very clear depiction. And then you have Frank, who's willing to sit down and talk with this guy. that, you know, is actually giving this guy the time of attention and could be actually benefiting. Because when you talk to, you know, about mentally ill people, those that struggle with mental illness, they are not going to say that they're not, but sometimes talking and hearing them person and just letting them know that they are heard makes all the difference.
Yep. Yeah, you're really right. It's interesting too, kind of the way that they the way they build the world of the movie is also very it's very insular. You know, you kind of just see the same people over and over again. They know each other's names. Then you see the only people you see that are kind of different are hookers. And so it's like the only other people that you see that change are still kind of a way of providing some sort of escape or comfort or, you know, things like that. And it's very interesting you brought up the idea of Noel being kind of a good picture of how a lot of the world treats people with mental illnesses or who are suicidal or things like that. And I feel like, honestly, the movie is built like that. The movie is built as a microcosm of people getting ignored by the world who all are having the same problems and are either dealing with them poorly or running away from them.
Sure, because you even have Frank, too, that is, you know, he's confiding in these partners.
Yeah.
You know, when you're spending, one of our podcasters here at Victims and Villains used to be an EMT. Mm-hmm. So I texted him during the movie, and I'm like, how long's an average shift? And he's like, well, they can go as little as 12 hours, but 24-hour shift is not unheard of.
Wow.
And that's insane to me to think about.
Yeah.
But I've never been there, so if any EMTs are listening to this, thank you for your service.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But, you know, every person is, trying to diagnose Frank differently.
Mm-hmm.
You have Marcus's character that's like, oh, yeah, you know, you have to learn to live with them, you know, you trust in Jesus kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, he just wants to work the job and help people.
Yeah, and then you have Tom's character that is basically saying, you know, hey, don't worry about this. You know, I think, you know, you just need something to focus your attention on.
Yeah, he's kind of the escapist.
And then you also have John Goodman's character that we meet in the beginning that kind of doesn't really understand. He doesn't care. He just wants to get in and get out.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of people, and I'm not saying that this is all, but I think that, you know, kind of controversial is when you're talking about mental health practices is, you know, do we actually listen to people or do we just try and prescribe drugs and get them out as quick as possible and treat the mental health practice as a revolving door in that case?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point.
And John Goodman character is kind of a depiction of that with the EMT world.
Yeah, it's kind of just this is my job, I'm going to do it, I need food, I'm hungry, we're late, let's go. Very pragmatic, not very he's not very aware or in the moment or understanding of oh yeah, Frank's in a bad way, or oh yeah, these other people are also kind of just they need something more than what they're getting, and he's just kind of there to do a job.
Yeah, and I want to kind of get into another gripe with this movie, Red Death.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I was going to bring that up if you didn't. Yes. Okay, so there is this and it's even kind of part of in descriptions of the movie, they'll mention the street drug Red Death. The drug is barely in the movie. You see maybe two people who have done it or overdosed on it. You see a little bit of maybe kind of a crime war about it, maybe. And it is entirely brushed under the rug and actually not a part of the plot at all.
Yeah, so they introduce this very early on.
Yeah, they totally do.
And it's when they bring in Mary's dad, and Frank's talking to the doctor that for some reason this hospital is always busy and yet only has one doctor. I don't know if that dawned on you.
Wow.
But Yeah.
That's interesting. There were a couple little things like that I noticed. I didn't know that one.
But it's interesting to talk about significantly, and because it's like, they give this like bottle, it's heroin mixed with other narcotic elements.
Yeah.
And like they go into detail about like what the drug's about. Like you meet a drug dealer that like could or could not actually be involved in Red Death. You meet a couple of gang members that OD or are near ODing on Red Death, but they never actually like do anything with it.
Never. Nope.
And I thought that when we met Tiger and Billy from Dr. Sleep, whose name I cannot remember, so he'll just be Billy. But when we meet Tiger and Billy, he's like the closest thing to a drug dealer we meet.
Yeah.
He's like, oh no, I'm not Red Death.
Yeah. And then he just becomes another, like, victim, kind of.
Yeah.
And it's not like... It's weird. There's this whole, like, pivotal scene where, like... Well, honestly, you feel like Frank chases the Mary character into this, like, really kind of den of an apartment where all the walls are red. And this guy is, like, giving out, like, be considered sleep pills, and she's just there. It's called the Oasis, and she's just there to, like, rest. And he's all about, like, no stress at all. And then it just ends up not being pivotal. It just ends up kind of not mattering. The people there just end up being another case.
Because he comes back and, like, the movie never makes it clear if it's, like, a attempted suicide or, like, a deal that just, like, went
It seems
south.
like it was a deal that went south. He was trying to escape.
Yeah, so he, like, ends up, like, getting, like, it's like a guardrail, kind of.
Yeah, so he tries to jump from one balcony to another and gets, like, stuck, like, literally with, like, part of, like, a railing through him.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of meet him.
Yeah.
Because you kind of get to understand a little bit more of Mary as a character through characters like him and Tiger and Noel, because you can understand that, like, okay, like, this is someone that actually used to be in, like, some real doo-doo back in the day.
Yeah.
And now, she's gotten clean.
She's trying to turn a new
But
leaf.
grief, again, with her father and worry and anxiety, all of that, bring us to some pretty desperate places.
Yep. Yeah. It's wild. Yeah, and but it's weird though. Like there are certain things that are aptly communicated, but on like a plot level, on like a message level, you kind of understand it. On a plot level, it's undeveloped. It just never gets really used. It's weird.
There's a lot of stuff in this movie that kind of never gets developed. Never gets fleshed out.
Yeah.
But I think Frank is an interesting character, and Nicolas Cage is so good in this role.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely good in this role.
So good.
Yeah, you get to see him, like, in the first act, he's honestly really kind of chill. You can tell he's always tired. You can tell he, like, just wants rest. That's kind of the way they portray his, like, his need for peace and solace in the first act, is like, I just want rest. And so he's really, really chill, and it's almost like as the movie builds and builds and builds, he gets more, restless. And he plays into it really, really well. The soundtrack plays into it really, really well. Nicolas Cage is great. I mean, there's only like one scene where he's kind of like Nicolas Cage, like wild and crazy and like yelling and stuff, and they're in the ambulance, like driving around, and there's these weird like sequences that are shot and then sped up, and it's kind of funny. But
late 90s, early 2000s, man. Those quick cuts.
Yeah, the quick cuts, exactly. And the Clash is playing, and there's one point where he like makes fun of, like, he starts like mimicking Ving-Rhames' character, and it's really hilarious and great and spot on. And but for the most part, it's very like he's very melancholy, but it's not melancholy in a way that like, oh, this is boring. Oh, he's like, this is a bad performance, or he's underperforming or underselling the character. He is just very like, I think he fits the tone of each act very, very well.
He's very transformative in that way.
Yeah.
the way that he can chameleon himself around the situation or something that's going through. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this movie is the deeper that you get into the final act, where he ultimately ends up doing this assisted suicide to marry his father, is that he becomes more unhinged as the plot goes on.
Right.
And the partners kind of
reflect that.
Yep. So you have that chill mode and / the I don't care mentality with John Goodman, and then you head into you're starting to kind of go down your slippery slope a little bit, losing your grip on reality, and that's reflected in Ving-rhames. And then you also have the Tom-Sizemore character that is just very energetic, very over the top, and by the time that we reach that point with Nicolas Cage, Frank is just kind of an unpredictable loose cannon.
He is. Yep.
That's
not in a Mandy way.
No.
But just like you really genuinely don't know what you're going to get. There are some scenes where he is very just chill. But loose cannon is still apt. Yeah.
And for me, I think watching Frank's arc throughout it's a very real depiction of like what it looks like to try and find peace, and how everyone around you interprets the situation. So in my notes, there's a conversation that Ving-rhames and Nicolas Cage have together, and Ving-rhames basically turns to him and says, everyone goes through a stretch where everyone dies. You just don't meditate on it. And that's easier said than done.
It is. Yeah. And it's like it's weird. It's not bad advice, but it's also only so, like you said, it's easier said than done. It's only so realistic advice. Yeah. But I think the cool part of that is like he was trying to, in sort of an indirect way, he was trying to get Nicolas Cage kind of out of that, like, perhaps out of his like guilty mindset, where it's just like, yeah, this can weigh on you, but you don't have to feel bad about it because it freaking happens. You're an EMT. It doesn't make it your fault. But he even talks about that. He's like, when somebody dies, you try to spread the blame. The needle wouldn't go in. The medic was late. The pills didn't work. Whatever. You try to do everything that you can to make sure that you are, at least on a conscious level, not at fault. Yeah, and it's really cool. I find, so the first and second act, but not the third. Again, movie ends weird. But the first and second act has like sort of narratives. Feels very noir in certain times of the Frank character, just kind of like explaining processes or mindsets or the job. And it's really, really cool. I wish they would have like had some of that inner monologue in the third act. But you do really get to see, in the second act especially, where he's just talking about that, like, when somebody dies, you spread the blame as much as you can. But it's implied that, like, you can't not feel bad about it. You can't not feel the guilt. You can't not feel the memories and the pressure. And, you just have to go back to work. And, I mean, he's like, you can tell, they don't go into how long their shifts are, but like the movie is like 80% at nighttime. So you can tell he's at least the graveyard shift, if not like a very long shift.
There's one scene in particular where he talks about, he's given that voiceover narrative and says, at 5 or 6 in the morning is kind of this unpredictable time where you think that you're out of the woodwork, and then it's like, bam, something surprises you and catches you off guard. And, I feel like doing that line of work in particular is, you need therapy or something. Like you need something that is going like an output that's basically going to allow you to just really process a lot of the things that you're seeing, because I think we think about when you talk about PTSD, it's like most people think Army. Most people think Marines, or branches of the military, Yep. And that's not always the case,
No.
PTSD comes in various forms. You know, we've talked about it in the past on victims, where you can have something as simple as a car accident can cause PTSD.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sexual assault is another one that can cause PTSD, and then you have lines of work like doctors, EMTs, firefighters, cops, that all experience the worst of our society.
Yep.
Every single day, every single shift, and it's like, how do I process that and compartmentalize that?
Yeah.
And men in particular, I think, you know, have a hard time processing and talking and communicating effectively what is going on and why they feel the way that they do, and
or how they actually feel.
Yeah, and there's one scene in particular where Frank's in the back of it's in the third act, because Tom Sizemore is his partner at that point. He's in the back and he's trying to make himself the vitamin B cocktail we were talking about.
Yep.
And he says, you know, I'm not sick, I just need a drink. And that's pretty much his like mantra from like Ving-Rhames to the end of the film. Like he doesn't want to be sober. He doesn't want to be sober because, you know, numbing the anguish instead of facing it. Even when he is at the Oasis and he takes the pills that try to cause him to sleep, he's faced with it and he wakes up. And, you know, they're so perplexed. They're like, what is going on right now? Like, you know, and it's the danger of, you know, trying to bury a lot of the stuff that you're experiencing, a lot of the trauma, and healing doesn't begin until you take that first step forward.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I really don't have anything to add.
Anything else you want to talk about this movie? You're gonna get in trivia?
Let's go trivia. Trivia's fun. We talked about Red Death, we talked about each act, we talked about I think I'm fine. Trivia's good.
All right, so let's see what trivia we have here from IMDb.
Oh, that one piece of trivia we talked about. Oh man.
Which one?
The one we were, the one we were watching the movie.
You're gonna have to refresh my memory, brother.
All right, so I'll handle the first piece of trivia, apparently. So this movie, 1999, Martin Scorsese, Nicolas Cage film, is the last movie to ever be put out
on the
Laserdisc. Yep. Yeah. Laser. So neither of us own a Laserdisc player, but I think both of us kind of have a low-key fascination with, this record-sized DVD. And Josh, I'm sitting here. Josh has he has Face Off with Travolta and Cage on Laserdisc, and they're just so cool. They're just I don't know. You could call them memoirs of a bygone era, but realistically speaking, they're really cool art pieces. They're so neat.
I would never want to I guess I would never want to invest into a Laserdisc player because of how expensive they are.
They are.
But I would love to experience it once.
So from what I understand, they're actually not better quality than tapes are. Betas were better than tapes, but Laserdiscs were about the same. Which blows my mind. I've never seen a beta or a Laserdisc, and beta failed fast because you couldn't fit enough on a tape. But really interesting. Yeah,
so I would now. I kind of want to get that and find it.
I do too. Yeah, because you can buy a record frame and just put it in there because it's the same size.
That's my goal, is to eventually have a wall dedicated just to stuff in my office. Right now I'm kind of in transition with horror and stuff like that. But I'm a cinephile first and foremost. So Martin Scorsese admitted that he did not enjoy shooting this film at all.
Wow.
Most of the film was shot at night in mid-December, so conditions were conditionally harsh.
Where? There's no snow.
Continuously harsh. It doesn't matter, man. Cold is cold.
I mean, yeah, but where was it shot? All right, December in Florida is not what?
New York.
New York, okay.
So, I mean, you're depending on what part of New York, you're up there in, some pretty cold weathers.
Yeah.
And coming back to Laserdiscs, This film and another Paramount release, Sleepy Hollow, also were the last done.
Very cool. So the Tim Burton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't know if it was the Johnny Depp one or the Jeff Goldblum one. Yeah, that's cool.
Screenwriter Paul Schrader, his first choice for the role of Frank Pierce, not actually Nicolas Cage. So this actually, had history gone a different way, we wouldn't be talking about this movie on That's High Praise.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, like,
you want to take a guess?
Oh, shoot. Keanu Reeves.
Edward Norton.
Edward Norton would have been a great choice. Not as good, but a great choice.
Well, he's also coming off of American History X, which really, really showed his acting skills as an actor.
Yeah.
And the range that he was allowed to have. I'm trying to think of other movies that he would have been coming off of around that time. He's still a couple years away from The Italian Job and still almost 10 years away from the MCU. But, I mean, he's definitely delivered a lot of amazing performances.
He was Bruce Banner.
A lot of people.
My go-to Norton is The Illusionist.
I love that movie.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Coming back to the casting, do you know why Nicolas Cage signed on to this role?
Because it was Scorsese.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, figured. It's just it's a great resume, piece.
But the thing that I think finds is most interesting about this is this thing has an impressive cast.
It does.
Because you have Martin Scorsese, obviously, yep. Nicolas Cage,
yep.
Patricia Arquette, Ving-Rhames, Tom Sizemore, John Goodman, Queen Latifah. That list just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, even Scrubs came out 2 years later, 2001. Mm-hmm. But I forget her name. The lady who played
Carla.
Let's see, Judy Reyes. She is like in the nurse in the ICU at the very end of the movie, and it's really cool. It's cool to see her. Like, I wonder if that's has anything to do with Scrubs.
Also, Mark Anthony plays Noel. And
yeah,
Mark Anthony, when I found that, is such a baffling choice for that cast. I just never think of Mark Anthony as an actor. I don't know if he's done anything past that point, but he did really, really well for this movie.
Yeah. Oh, he did a great job, especially this may not be on him, but costume and makeup did an incredible job on him. But yeah, he is mostly, he is a singer-songwriter, by and large. He has done movies, and he seems to have done movies for a while. But yeah, he is a singer-songwriter, and he does a great job. He really does.
This was the only movie of Scorsese's films in the 90s to receive no Oscar nominations.
Rip. I can't blame anybody.
No, this movie,
it's not Oscar worthy.
Aside from maybe Nicolas Cage's performance,
sure,
no one, there's no reason for this film to be on the tier of something like Goodfellas or Casino, because there's so many plot holes in this movie.
Yeah,
and this film does a good job at navigating through things as far as character study aspects are concerned.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's just no.
Yeah. Nope. It's not there.
Nicolas Cage would go through an average of 10 shirts a night while shooting this movie because of blood, sweat, and mud.
Really?
Yes.
Real blood, sweat, and mud?
Mm-hmm.
That's wild.
So this is the thing that baffles me most about this movie is the pairing between the director and writer.
Okay.
And so Martin Scorsese, obviously I think all of us know that name,
sure.
But Paul Schrader is the gentleman who wrote this movie. Worked together on several times.
Okay.
Worked together on Taxi Driver in 1976. Raging Bull, 1980, and The Last Temptation of Christ in 1988. So you have 3 heavy hitters.
Right.
And, most people would regard Taxi Driver and Raging Bull both as perfect or near perfect films.
Sure.
And yet, you have plot holes.
This whatever movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? I mean, who produced it?
I don't know. I will tell you once I get out of here. This also reunites Nicolas Cage and John Goodman from Raising Arizona.
This is the first movie they did since Raising. Wow, that's well over 10 years. That movie was 87, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
This also reunites Nicolas Cage and Ving-Rhames, who previously appeared in Con Air together 2 years prior.
Cool. I'm trying to think if there's anybody I really love Nick Cage with. There's some actors and actresses that just you always want to see Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler. But Nick Cage, I don't know. I don't think, when I think of Nick Cage, I don't think of John Goodman. That's not,
No.
Not interesting.
No, and he's one of those very few actors that I think we can't, pair him up with someone just because of how different he is.
Yeah.
So around this time, too, he would go on to do... before this, he did 8mm, which is my favorite Nicolas Cage movie.
Whoa.
I love that movie. And it pairs him with a very young Joaquin Phoenix. A punk Joaquin Phoenix, I should also mention.
Nice.
And then right after this, he would go on to do Gone in 60 Seconds, which is the complete opposite tone of this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that because of how versatile as an actor Nicolas Cage is, you can't really pin him down with anyone.
Yeah,
or actress.
The only thing I can think of is just the simple fact that National Treasure got a sequel.
True.
That's it. I don't know of another Nick Cage movie that got a sequel.
And when you think about Nicolas Cage in National Treasure, you never once think or consider the fact that, hey, this is Nicolas Cage and I'd never...
John Voight or
any of those actors, because you only ever consider Nicolas Cage. And you only consider the first National Treasure, not Book of Secrets.
I mean, for me, I would consider both, but I would consider the characters, not the actors. That's the thing.
Okay.
And maybe that's just because I grew up on that movie or because it's just very well done, but that movie to me it's well done. It doesn't feel like, John Voight and Nicolas Cage. It feels like Ben Gates and his dad, almost, it feels very well built as far as the world goes.
I feel like we're going on. You're true. And you guys can check out our full thoughts on.
Oh yeah, you can.
National Treasure 1 and 2. Back when this used to be the Cage Corner podcast, still in the Victims and Villains RSS feed. So make sure you guys hit subscribe over there.
Yeah.
But I think we should just arrive at our final ratings for this movie.
Yeah.
So on our Cage scale, 0 to. Oh wait, hold on. No, that's right. We redid that. We
redid it?
We redid the rating scale.
We're not doing 0.5s anymore?
No. So,
okay.
Bringing Out the Dead, 1999. Is it worthy of high praise or not?
It is not worthy of high praise.
I'm going to kind of go in the middle and say, I think there are aspects of this film that are worthy of praise.
Ving-rhames.
Ving-rhames with hair is super bizarre. It's like seeing Samuel L. Jackson do a hair movie.
Ooh, true.
or going back and watching Die Hard. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah, moonlighting. Yeah,
moonlighting. But this movie, but I think that there are too many plot holes for me to not to overlook.
Yeah.
So
we're not doing numbers anymore?
No.
Oh,
that's high praise, bro.
Fair enough.
But Bringing Out the Dead is not worthy of high praise.
It is not worthy of high praise.
But where can people find you online, though?
Yeah, so Mullet Stash, at Mullet Stash, Stache, on Instagram. And that is that's pretty much it. I've been off Facebook for a while. We'll see if that reignites. But yeah, I post a lot about tapes.
Records
and
tapes.
Yeah, it's records and tapes. I have a very analog Instagram.
This is true. Can confirm. You guys can follow me. I'm on Letterboxd. This is the only social media platform that I'm really active on. It's at Captain Nostalgia. But you can find our Letterboxd is a movie. It's just movie social media.
Okay.
Basically, it's just a watch diary. It's great. If you guys aren't on Letterboxd, it's as Nicolas and I will always tell, it is the best social media out there. It's just no toxicity.
Great album though.
It's great.
Well, in that case, if we're going to be obscure and weird about this, you can find me under Damian Wayne on Discogs. If you want to look at my record collection, yeah, Discogs, Damian Wayne.
All right. Well, you guys can, on that note, you guys can find our mother channel, Victims and Villains, at victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find access to past episodes and other podcasts, movie reviews, social medias, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Twitch, and most importantly, our mental health resource library, the real reason why we do this. And if you guys would like to support us, you guys can go to patreon.com/victims and villains. All of your money is currently going towards getting mental health resources into schools. For as little as $1 a month, you guys can help us get help 2 kids a month. It's really good cause over there. But just to encourage you guys to reach out if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. There are 130 suicides as of this recording that occur each and every day. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides internationally. That's 1 death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, consider reaching out to us or choosing any of our resources at victimsandvillains.net/hope. Because much like Nicolas Cage, you are worthy of high praise and you have value and worth. So we'll be back in a little bit talking about Rumblefish from 1983. We hope you guys have a good day.